Okay, Jim Mitchell's here. Let's head to, how you doing today, Jim?
Pretty damn well, considering the month I've had. I'm doing all right.
You've had quite a month. I guess you've probably been asked this question 4 million times. So I guess we'll start with, what happened and what were you thinking when, after it happened? What went through your head?
Well, I don't know exactly what happened, and that's a shoot. I don't know how it happened. I don't know why it happened. It just did. What went through my head after it happened was that Mikey needed to get some of my blood off of his face, and it scared the hell out of me. It was I was in shock, and actually it's kind of funny. I had several people call and apologize to me when I was in the hospital. The whole locker room called. They were really good about that over the week that I was in the hospital. And a few of them called and said, I'm sorry for laughing at you. I thought you were ribbing us. I was like, what the hell are you talking about? And, I've always got some new gimmick to throw in a promo every week. Or, I'm always coming up with something new. And I guess when I walked back there, the blood was jettisoning out of my palm. A lot of them thought I had some sort of gimmick that I was going to use. And I was just squirting fake blood all over the place. But it was...
I probably would have thought that, too.
Yeah. It was unreal. And... the first several days were just sort of in a morphine haze. They kept me pretty doped up while they attended to me, and ultimately I turned out being very lucky. It was reported all over the net that I was missing fingers or missing a hand or had been shot by a gun and stuff like that, and it actually did look after it first happened, especially because of the way the skin was all blown to hell. It looked like I was like I had one finger hanging, my index finger, because it was right at the base where it was blown up. But they did a really good job with the surgery, and it's going to be probably a year before I have full use, full command and use of my hand. It's pretty weak right now. You can't, for example, you can't grab a beer bottle tight enough to undo the cap, or open a peanut butter jar or something. But the doctor said I've been healing very nicely. I was just there yesterday, and I've probably got another probably 2 months before I can start physical therapy on it and start trying to strengthen it and stretch it out and whatnot. Because right now it's kind of it's bent. It won't open all the way. If it wasn't your hand, you wouldn't know it. You just, it would look normal to you, but it won't open all the way up. And that's because of the scarring and the nerve grafts and stuff like that they did. And that's what I'm going to have to work on over the next year, being able to get, full mobility back in my hand.
And how many times did you use the gun before this happened?
Hundreds. I used it, I played with it all the time. It was a great thing for ribs at work or elsewhere. Just, here's this creepy-looking guy, and all of a sudden a big ball of fire flies out of his hand. I'd honestly probably fired the thing, and I owned 3 of them, just hundreds of times. That's why I don't know why it screwed up. In fact, right before it happened, I probably shot 10 fireballs in the direction of Mikey and over his head, just playing with it and trying to get it ready for the show. So, I don't know.
And you think you'll ever use it again?
I don't know. Ron Buffone, one of our producers, said, I don't mind the fire motif since you're a devil, but let's leave the pyrotechnics alone. So, and I'll probably be a little gun shy, I would imagine, for a while too. I've actually got the one that blew up, and that's kind of a scary sight, or what's left of it. But I've got a couple more laying around here on my desk right now, and it's a little creepy just picking them up and looking at it, like when I try to explain to somebody what happened, and I show them the one that blew up, and I say, well, this is what it's supposed to look like. And, it kind of gives you a creepy little feeling when you're holding it.
So it just basically it basically blew up in your hand?
It was like a mini grenade.
Oh.
It was a brass tube. 2 brass tubes, actually, about the size of a .44 Magnum cartridge case, 2 of those, and it didn't blow out, like it should have. It didn't blow, if it had gone off right, the flame would have shot out the top, and there was no flame. There was just an explosion, so I don't know what happened.
Now, was there a chance that was it something that like other people around you could have gotten hurt, or was it just like you holding it and that's why you got hurt?
If somebody had, luckily there was, Mikey was sitting 2 feet in front of me when it happened. Conceivably, if somebody had been, well, I was loading the thing, so if I'd had my hand out and it did it, it could have. And then again, it may have just all screwed my hand up worse. I don't know. It's not something that, in theory, you would think would be, that dangerous. So, that's really not an answer I can give because I just don't know. I mean, it seemed harmless enough, and I'd been playing with the thing for, 6 months, and I really don't know what happened. So
when, what was I going to say? As far as like a year from now, did the doctors pretty much tell you that you would have most of your, hand strength back, or is it?
Yeah, the big thing, like my 2 fingers, my index and my middle finger are, because there was nerve damage and tendons and nerves and everything were just like blown up. They're numb on not on the outsides of the fingers, but on the insides where they touch. I really don't have any feeling. It feels like they've got Novocaine in them. Mm. And he said, and I asked him about that yesterday. He said that will come back. At least a good measure of it will come back. So I'm optimistic, and the doctor seems optimistic, and I'm just keeping my fingers crossed.
Hmm. Switching to ECW. What's your feelings right now as far as ECW is concerned with a more limited schedule and things like that that's going on?
Well, I think Paul is doing what, and it's not like he sits down with me and discusses, his business plans in detail or anything. But I think right now he's doing what has to be done to save money and keep the company alive. And it has been a rocky road on and off, and there's probably going to be a few more bumps in the road before things get taken care of and squared away. But I'm pretty optimistic. I think he's got a few things on the burner that until I hear them discussed by him publicly, I won't go into them. But I think he's got some things cooking that are going to make the company turn around and be up and running the way it should be, and the way it should have been when we were on TNN. I think we'll get a network behind us that will believe in us. Where that's going to be, I don't know. I mean, it was interesting that we've been showing up on Farm Club and apparently have an agreement to continue doing that for a while. It certainly doesn't hurt us at all to get that kind of exposure, and I think that's our demographic, really, or a lot of our demographic that would be watching that Farm Club show. Of course, I mean, you can't keep the company alive if all you have is Farm Club,
No.
I guess it's a minute of a clip interspersed in a video or something. That won't keep it alive, but it'll at least keep the product out there. And people who don't know what ECW is, might start saying, hey, who are these guys doing all this crazy stuff, and start inquiring into USA about it. And I don't know that USA is where we're going to wind up. I have no idea. I've got a couple of suspicions of where that could be. And I think Paul's just right now trying to get the best deal for the boys. I know one thing that he has said that he's been very concerned about was he wanted to protect his talent. He didn't want to get any kind of deal where people can come in there and say, well, we don't like this guy, or this guy. Paul wants to be loyal to the guys that have been loyal to him. And, it really is a very, very hard-working, dedicated dressing room. And, I don't think Paul would want to say, okay, somebody dropped $20 million in my lap, let me go sign Scott Hall and Kevin Nash and, The Rock or whoever, and all these guys who were with me when I was down and out can kiss my ass. I don't think that's what he would do at all. And, he said he's not going to. And the boys have been very, and like I said, it has been kind of rocky and frustrating at times. but it's like a family, and that's one thing you hear so often about the ECW locker room and the atmosphere, is it really is a close-knit family. And do we have our squabbles? Certainly. Do we have, are there times you want to strangle Paul Heyman or he wants to strangle you? Sure. But it is a family, and they stick together, and it's just been, we've been riding the wave out. But I think something's going to come around with the company, definitely.
On Nitro on Tuesday, it will air at 8 p.m. Eastern Time. So it will not be head-to-head with this show. It'll be 8 to 10, which is the normal time. It would be 6 o'clock only in the Mountain Standard Time, I guess. So anyway, that's the deal there. Let me see what else. Also, I want to make mention that at www.delphi.com/Observer Live, there's a Wrestling Observer Live chat room, and it's going on right now. So if you want to make fun of us, that's where you go. Okay.
Dave, let me ask you, who chooses your bumper music? That was the most non-wrestling bumper music I've ever heard.
I actually don't know.
We've had a lot worse than that.
Oh, we've had some great ones the day that they decided to take off on that 70s guys motif, and we started doing all those Brady Bunch themes and stuff. Let's see. This is mentioning something that we talked about earlier. Rock did kick out of the stunner at WrestleMania 15, but it was an unofficial 10 count because there was no ref. When the ref ran in, Rock kicked out. Also, no Nitro on Christmas and New Year's Day, which I knew about. What is the deal there?
So what does that mean, 2 weeks off?
No, wait a minute. Now, there's something going on. God, now what? There's not. I mean, they're doing TV tapings for those shows. I don't know if they air. I got to find out about that because one of them there was going to be no show, and then I think the other one there was. Oh God, they're not live on either Monday. I know that, but they were taping on one Monday, and then for one of those days, but I don't know when it was going to air. And then the other one, I think there was going to be no show. This really helps Starrcade a lot, though, don't you think, Brian? Mm-hmm. Yeah, God, how do they do that?
Well, Starrcade will be over.
What?
Wait, what?
No. I don't mean for that one. No, I mean not having a Nitro this coming Monday.
Oh yeah.
Because no one's going to know that thing's on Tuesday. They didn't hype it at all. So the last time they
mentioned throughout the David Copperfield special, alerting fans.
Business as usual in Atlanta.
Oh, we have a lot to say about that. I don't know. Did you watch our show last night, by any chance?
No, I honestly cannot even watch it anymore. Every once in a while I'll try, or if one of my buddies on there calls and says, watch my match and let me know how you think I did, I'll do it. But it's, every once in a while they'll pull a decent show out of their hat, but it's just gotten so bad. I can't, excuse me, I can't, it's painful to watch. They've got, like these young guys in there that, they don't give the ball to the right people, and they give it to the wrong people, and I don't begrudge anybody whatever kind of contract they can get. I don't begrudge anybody their spot, because, unless you're one of the millionaires, you don't choose your spot. But, gosh, I mean, some of the things they have going down there are just horrible. The writing just drives me up a wall. I can't follow it. And, they've got a couple of good things going on. Scott Steiner, of course, being one of them. But it's, that is a company that has been in disarray for a good 2.5, pushing 3 years now. And,
it was in disarray when they didn't even know it was in disarray and it was doing great business.
Yeah, it was.
In some ways. Because everything was being done at the last, those night shows that were doing big ratings were still being done at the last minute.
Oh, yeah. Well,
changed in mid-show.
We would get there at, I think they wanted us there around noon or 1 o'clock for a show that started at 8. So you would get with, say, somebody like Terry Taylor, who I think is a sterling individual. But, and a very, he likes to do things logically and plan them out and have a storyline that goes from A to B to C and has a finish that makes sense. And he'd have all this stuff written out, and everybody would think they had their matches together, or think they knew what they were doing, and 15 minutes before the show starts, all of a sudden they're back in the Xerox room, and they're redoing all the format sheets and changing things, and you're walking out the curtain, and they're changing a finish, or saying you don't have 10 minutes, you've got 2 minutes. I mean, it was a madhouse. I mean, and that was when things were good. But because things were good and the morale was a lot better, there wasn't as much grumbling about it as you're going to find now, of course.
Now, you know where Canyon's been lately?
That's funny. That's my question right on my list.
What?
That's the next thing I was going to ask. What's up with Canyon?
Well,
he went home, and then we haven't heard from him.
Well, he had some things to tend to at home. Actually, a couple of unfortunate family losses back to back that he had to deal with, and I think they don't know what to do with him. And he's been from time to time. I think it's been publicly recorded, so I'm not telling tales out of school. He's been pretty pissed off, and on and off with them. He thinks they get him started doing something for 4 or 5 weeks, and then they pull it back. And I actually saw him. I spent a week with him about 2 weeks ago, and he's in good spirits. He's definitely in good spirits, but he has no idea. It's not like he's walking around grumbling about the company right now, but he has no idea what they're going to do with him. And if I were him, I wouldn't be in any hurry to get back until they get their act together. Of course, that's a double-edged sword, because with the short attention span of the fans these days, you can be off TV for 2 months and they don't know who you are anymore. And you've got to start all over again.
There's something to be said when you have a guy who's a really talented worker and even has some size, and is coming off of his best gimmick ever. Everybody was cracking up at his DDP stuff.
Oh yeah.
And they have no idea what to do with him. When DDP's back, I would just think that there's something really obvious, perhaps he could come back and attack DDP. Perhaps.
Yeah.
Oh, come on now.
Or he could come back, pretend to attack DDP, and they can hug, and then
become a team,
and become a tag team,
well,
and turn on Kevin Nash. No,
I've certainly heard him discuss both of those ideas. He's got a lot of ideas. Canyon's the kind of guy that will sit down, for 2 days and write out storylines. He used to do it back when he was Mortis, and he was doing it in the Raven thing. He had a big hand in that. Of course, Scotty had the pull to get things done at the time, so he would bounce ideas off of Raven a lot, and they came up. He had a big hand in a lot of the storylines, with he and Raven, but and I've seen stuff where he wrote out a bunch of stuff about the Page gimmick. In fact, I think he was writing up that Page gimmick 3 months before it hit TV. I remember him bouncing ideas off of me about it then, of the, Positively Canyon. And, he's a very creative guy, and he's the kind of guy that, that they should have somebody like that, a younger guy in there that has good ideas and understands wrestling and understands what makes sense, and let him put his hand in there. But I guess he does not have the political stroke these days, especially after the way some of his blow-ups he's had. So
this is from Chris, who wants to know: is there any thoughts that you have of suing the manufacturer of that gun?
No comment on that at the moment.
Okay. Let's run to Tony in Long Island. Tony, you're first up with Jim Mitchell.
Hey guys, how you doing?
Hi,
real good.
Good. Quick couple questions before I get to ECW. Dave, I was watching a tape mid-1980s Flair interview, and
there were a lot of those.
Yes. No particular importance on the interview, but he says something to the cameraman to adjust the camera so he'd focus in on the belt, and he calls him Mr. Dillinger. Is that the same guy who does the security now? Was he a cameraman in NWA?
I don't remember that. Jim, do you remember him ever being cameraman?
This was in
Doug
85.
Dillinger?
Doug Dillinger. I never remember Doug Dillinger's cameraman.
He was always a security guy with Crockett.
Yeah, and before that he was a Charlotte police officer, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, Flair says, move the cameraman here, Mr. Dillinger. So maybe
he meant for Dillinger to move the cameraman.
That's what it sounds like.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Dillinger was probably standing there.
And listen, as far as ECW goes, I've been following it since it became Extremes or beginning in '94, and unfortunately, it's a shame of all the talent that's passed through there. I think it's really, in my opinion, a shell of what it once was, except for a few bright spots bright spots, including the stuff that you're doing now with Jim, with Tajiri and Mikey. I think the stuff is tremendous. And you know, when I watch wrestling, I always watch it with the tape going, recording, just in case you never want to miss some of those special things that happened. And you can always judge something that's good when you don't even wait for the show that's over to go back and replay it real quick. Mm-hmm. And I've done that on a couple of the segments you guys have done because they've just been tremendous.
Thank you.
Great stuff. But, you know, I'll tell you, my personal experience with ECW, dealing with them over the years, and a lot of this goes back into the mid-'90s, was, you know, Paul may be a creative genius, but I always said that, you know, when you used to call down there for tickets or talk to people for information, that that company was doomed to failure because there was nobody running that company that had any business savvy, because it was just a complete nightmare to deal with them as far as getting tickets, or once you got tickets, once you went to their arena, you know, the arena or whatever. I mean, there was so many people that used to go there that you couldn't even, if you had a ticket, it didn't mean a thing. It didn't mean that you were even guaranteed the seat you had. They oversold the building. They did that up here in New York, and it was just a complete fiasco. You'd call up, request tickets, and they couldn't even tell you where you were sitting. And it was just a nightmare. And it's always, and just recently I tried dealing with them, and some of the same problems. You know, until Paul delegates some authority to somebody that knows what they're doing, you know, I don't care how creative you are, you've got to run a company on more than just one facet of putting out, you know, being a creative wrestling booker. I wonder what you guys thought about that.
Well, I would say that to the degree to which any of what you're saying is correct, and because I've never, you know, obviously I don't have to scramble for ECW tickets, so I wouldn't know. I would think that to the degree any of those criticisms are valid, that they will be fixed once we land on the proper network, because with the proper network is going to come the kind of money needed for the extra staffing and whatnot to run a company on a national level. And we are a mom and pop operation as far as the and I don't mean that as a bad thing, but, you know, we're a small, independently owned wrestling company, and, you know, we don't have a giant office with 100 people sitting in it answering the phones all day and handling things. You've got a handful of people that have to do the workload that goes into trying to get those shows together would blow your mind, and trying to handle it. And could we stand some more people and delegating some more things out? I would think we could. Definitely, and I think that will be solved once we get our network situation and get all the money that comes with it taken into effect.
Mm-hmm. Dave, you have any thoughts on that?
Well, I mean, I hadn't actually heard, you know, that these complaints in a while, but I mean, I remember years ago when the ECW arena was really hot, I used to hear them every show, and I don't really understand how, you know, you can't reserve seats yet. They didn't do that, and I remember all those people going. I remember going to the ECW arena and seeing all those people in line at the last minute, you know, trying to get in, and then having standing room in that building totally overflowed, and thinking about, like, you know, why don't they buy in advance? And then people would explain to me, buying in advance doesn't matter because you're still going to end up in that same line.
Right.
And, you know, so it was. I don't know. You know, I think that the answer is they're, you know, no one in ECW will deny that they're totally understaffed.
Right.
And everyone's, you know.
You know, Dave, one time we got completely screwed down there, coming, you know, making a 3.5-hour drive in the middle of the winter to go down there. We used to make it regularly and didn't complain about it. It was the trip was well worth it, we thought, and then got completely screwed down there, and then got kicked out after the injustice that went on down there, and took the time to write them, type them up like a 5-page letter. And, you know, after all the money that we spent down there with all the stuff we used to buy, no response. Wrote another one, no response. And I said, you know what? Okay, maybe, you know, Paul doesn't even know what's going on because he's so busy with the show, and that's understandable. But when somebody takes the time to write you a letter, and, you know, you got loyal customers that are not only coming down but bringing new people all the time, and they don't respond to you, I said, you know what? Screw you guys. And that's why less people go to their shows now, I think. I mean, you know, I tell you, we had WWF, WCW up here. We wouldn't even go to the shows up here. We'd go make the trip down to Philly because it was well worth it. Now, I know the same bunch of people I know, they don't do it anymore because they're just sick and tired of getting screwed over, and that was really the way we felt. And I mean, it was great once you were there. We used to say by intermission that the trip was already well worth it. That's how great those shows were, but they definitely didn't take care of most of their fans down there. And that's why I'm not surprised that they have less fans now. I mean, it's not the only reason. It's because they've lost a lot of talent, but they got to realize that. You got to take care of your people, your fans. So
there's an inevitability about the talent loss just because they can't offer the money that the other companies can. And if you really look back at wrestling, back in the territorial days, a lot of what the Royal ECW functions as was something that, like a lot of the smaller territories, like your Alabama territory or something, they never had the big money, and they would create new wrestlers. And if those wrestlers actually were good or marketable, the Alabama wrestlers, they would end up on Georgia Championship Wrestling because then it was national exposure, or they would end up with the Crockett's or someone like that. And Paul Heyman, let's face it, he has created an unbelievable number of stars that are in WWF and that went through WCW, WCW Blue, many of whom, those companies, if there had never been an ECW, and you know about this, from Malenko and Eddie Guerrero and Chris Benoit and all those guys, they would have been, the minute if they had never gone through ECW, and forget about Mysterio Jr. and people like that, people would have gone, these guys can't make it in the United States. I mean, that was the thing. Benoit was in WCW the first time, and he was doing jobs for Thunder and Lightning, and people don't even remember who those guys are. You know what I'm saying? And it wasn't until Paul brought him in and put him over and all that the idea, whether it was Kevin Sullivan or whomever, that was like, wow, maybe we could do something with these guys in this country after all. But the thing is, all of them, if they get really marketable and really good, the big guys are always going to be in need of talent, and they're going to call, and until, you can offer similar salaries, you're not going to be able to keep those guys, and that's the inevitability. And the one thing he does have going for him is that, every time you think he's down and out when it comes to talent, you'll see some guy like Easy Money who, was working in the independents, and you're going my God, this guy's really good.
Hey, Dave.
So, yeah.
Dave, quick question. Is Paul the kind of guy who if he had an opportunity to bring on somebody who would make a big investment into the company, a big financial investment, but also wanted to have power and say on the wrestling side of things, is he the type of guy that would really not want that and would forsake that financial investment coming in to have 100% control?
It depends on what you're talking about as far as say.
Are you talking about a money mark or a guy in the wrestling business?
Yeah, I'm saying a guy who wants to put down lots of money, but he also wants to say to Paul, I'd like to change some of these angles and stuff like that, and say, nah, Paul, let's let's do this on TV tonight or something like that.
With or without a knowledge of wrestling?
Let's say he didn't have much of a knowledge of wrestling.
I think Paul would be scared to death of that. Don't you, Jim?
Yeah, I don't think he would do that at all. And to some degree, I guess that's what he did with Todd Gordon. Todd Gordon was the backer for the longest time, or one of the major backers, and I know that he had a lot of input into what went on, and those shows and stories were well received, so I guess the arrangement worked. But I couldn't see Paul, letting a Jim Herd sort of person come in, and, the next thing you know, Anarchy Rules pay-per-view is headlined by the Ding Dongs and Mantar. I couldn't ever see that happening with Paul.
Let's see. There's a question here from Sean for Jim, and it says, are Jazz, Psychosis, and Prodigy still with ECW?
I asked about Jazz yesterday or the day before, and my understanding is that Jazz is definitely with the company. Psychosis, I don't think he is with us anymore, and
he's not.
I think Prodigette is no longer there on her own accord, but I'm not positive about that. I read somewhere, I haven't spoken to her, but I read somewhere that she had to move and had some things going on, and had to move and was not going to be coming back.
Okay.
So that's all I know about that.
What's your thoughts regarding, when you got hurt, it was like one of the stranger things that's ever happened in wrestling. And, right before pay-per-view, and then they try to make an angle out of it. And then the first week of TV they did. The second week, it was completely ignored. The third week, they were back to the angle. And then since then, it's been ignored again. As far as, it's funny because people have asked me about the angle, and I personally didn't like the idea of how they handled the angle, but I also talked to some people who kind of thought that you might be one of the people who would not be uncomfortable with it at all. But it's been start and stop. What's your thoughts now going back, and do you just figure let's leave it alone, or what's your thoughts?
Well, first of all, to address it from the beginning, I don't think that, and also by the time they were on TV, which I guess was about midway through the pay-per-view, saying that they heard my fingers were cut off, and Paul, came up with something in a hurry. Paul knew at that point that I was not going to die. I had already been in touch with them from the hospital, and they knew I was hurt, but I was gonna live to see another day. And I personally have absolutely no problem with that being turned into an angle. And the reason being, to me that's the nature of the game, and it's like Bruno's broken neck, or saying Stan Hansen hit him with the lariat to help get Stan Hansen over stronger, and things like that just throughout the years. Or Ric Flair needed plastic surgery, so they did the angle where they slammed his head in the cage, and then they showed pictures of him in the hospital with his face looking like Frankenstein. That's always gone on, and I think that when you come into the wrestling business, you should have at least enough knowledge of history to know that's how things go, and that's one of the things that comes with the territory. They did the same thing with Austin getting run over, It doesn't bother me at all, and hell, I was calling Paul from the hospital bed that night after the show was over, saying, hey, why don't you come up here and film something? I don't know what we can do, but, the Sinister Minister's in bed, and, I'm all bandaged up, and maybe we can make something out of it. Let's go against the wall and see what sticks. And he declined to do that. But then, a lot of people were really pissed off over that footage that aired the following week where all the EMTs and the cops were running around, right? I don't understand that at all. I think I read in the Torch or something, they said, we're trying to get the PTC to come after us by doing that. And what the hell would they come after them for? For showing a bunch of fat cops running around and screaming to cut off the cameras? And, you can't see me, you can't see any blood, you can't see any guts, but I can cut on the damn TV. People were saying it was in poor taste. I can cut on the TV every night. My wife's a big mark for those, shows on the Learning Channel where they've got the hospital trauma victims and whatnot. And, I'm watching a kid who's on life support and his family's sitting there crying. Just looks like he's had his head run over by a car, and they show them cutting the damn button off, to his life support, and the family crying, and they follow him around to the funeral. That, to me, is in poor taste. What they did to me, I thought was just completely innocuous. I don't know why everybody got up in arms about it. And as far as where he's been with the angle, up and down, if he's decided to drop it, that's fine with me. If he wants to get a storyline going with it, I'll be more than happy to jump right in. The only thing, the thing that I thought was kind of weird about it, not even weird, was just that since everybody knew what happened, immediately, and I think Dreamer came out and made an announcement to the crowd and said, hey, he was in an accident, and, and he told the crowd exactly what happened, or to the, as well as he knew it at the time. And I don't know that they would buy that they would say, oh, okay, you told us what happened and in detail, and now you're going to put the storyline on it. On the other hand, wrestling is all about suspension of disbelief, and if you're going to, like I said on Mikey's website, if you're going to shit on it because it's a poorly booked story, or you don't like the way it's handled, or you don't think it's written well, but not because you think they're doing me any injustice, because, I had full knowledge of what was going on, and for my money, I would have taken it further. You know, the way I look at it is I busted my ass for 11 years to get the kind of exposure that I'm getting now. And you may sit there and say, oh, well, you're only on ECW. You're not even on national television anymore. But the fact is, I've spent, 3 years in WCW, and during the year that I was on television prominently, we were doing, 3 5s, 4 5s in the ratings, which is 4 times what ECW ever did on TNN. And I couldn't get arrested if I tried to. Nobody knew who I was. And on the basis of our TNN coverage that we had, and just on the hardcore shows, I'm recognized everywhere I go. There's not a day that I leave the house that I don't have at least a couple of people who recognize me from ECW. I love
Why do you think
the
that is?
exposure. Excuse me?
Why do you think that is?
Paul has given me a pretty damn prominent position. And I'm not just talking about the people that say, hey, look at that weird guy with the long fingernails and the funny eyebrows and beard. That's a whole there's a lot more of that than there is wrestling stuff. But Paul gave me the opportunity to try to make something. He gave me the ball. And I'd never been given the ball in WCW, so nobody knew who the hell I was, and nobody cared. Paul's allowed me to play with this character and have fun with it, and the fans have responded. And I think, and of course, I'm pretty, I'm going to stand out in the crowd more than I did then. Back when I was in WCW, I looked like a cross between Todd Gordon and the guy who plays keyboards for Night Ranger or something. But it's. I've certainly refined my appearance a great deal from back then, and that, of course, helps. But Paul really just gave me the opportunity and the exposure. And there must have been enough people flicking the channels on Friday nights at 8 o'clock to see it. So it carries over.
One thing about the angle and the unique audience of ECW is that the ECW audience, more than any audience of any television show, often, we talk about, booking for the internet and things like that,
right.
and you're narrow casting if you're WCW that has millions and millions of viewers, and not a high percentage of them really are on the internet. And WWF, the percentage is probably, pretty much minuscule,
right.
Even though their website's pretty popular. With ECW, there's two things. The word gets around those buildings really quick, and I mean, the proof positive was the night that Taz was, when it came pretty much evident that Taz was losing the title in Chicago, and he was leaving to go to the WWF, and he came in, and everyone in the building knew something that they had no business knowing unless they were on the internet. And I think in your case, if the same exact thing had happened to you and you were working in WWF, I think they could have built a storyline around it because, 2%, 5%, even 10% might have known, and 90% didn't know. But in ECW, since pretty much I think most of the ECW audience knew what really happened to you, it's kind of hard to say, somebody cut your fingers off with scissors.
Yeah.
That was my problem with that angle, just because, especially with ECW where they kind of try to do more realism-based angles, that you're telling the people something that's kind of way out there, but they also know that it's not true. Unlike, say, just an example, where probably you and I would agree that WCW totally dropped the ball on the Mick Foley Vader thing that happened in Germany, because they could have done, and then WWF could have done it too when they were both in the same company, just because it's a real incident, people knew it really happened, they know he didn't tear his ear off, but people will be willing to accept, as wrestling fans, he had something to do with it enough to where you can get a good, believable grudge out of it.
Right. And there's other ways that they could, that this thing with my hand could go. I mean, I've actually had several ideas that are pretty damn logical as far as a way to handle it that don't necessarily mean that I got my fingers cut off. And I think the way it has been played is that they're sort of like Sal and the FBI are insinuating that they might have had something to do with it. I don't think they've come out and said that they did it, have they?
No. In fact, they do they've done the thing where they don't know what's going on and they pretend they play dumb, but then they'll do the OJ,
Sure.
just like OJ type of thing. Yeah.
Sure. And it's weird the way stuff gets around the buildings too, like you said. And of course I can't understand how in the hell we have those damn meetings, and before I get home they're on the internet. The backstage meetings, and they're almost verbatim. But it's it's a very different crowd from what you would find in WCW, and I don't think that we book for the internet. I don't think that I think booking for the internet is dumb. I think booking for the sheets is even dumber, which I think WCW is guilty of both on a lot of occasions. But we have a very unique audience, and I think as long as it's presented well, they'll go along with it ultimately.
What's your thoughts as far as like in this managing role and the guys that you're managing in that match they had on the pay-per-view and everything, and you know, like with Tajiri, who I think is one of the most talented guys in the entire business.
Yeah.
And yet he's a guy. It's just a weird example of a guy who's very, very over in ECW, unbelievably talented, and yet I think we probably all agree if either WWF or WCW brought him in, they would not even. One, they wouldn't make an effort to get him over, and two, if he snuck over, they still wouldn't recognize it.
If Tajiri went to WCW, rather than getting the sort of, and this is going on past experience with that company, of course, unless somebody smartens up there and recognizes talent for what it is and the way it can be utilized properly. If Tajiri were in WCW, he'd be doing jobs on Worldwide to AWOL. He would be treated the same way almost all the Japanese guys were. I think the only Japanese guy in Atlanta that ever got any kind of a real push was Dragon, and that was kind of a mid-card at best.
That was only halfway, too.
Yeah. There's so much that can be done with these people, and that's one of the things where Paul sees talent and utilizes it, and he gets the most of what he can out of what he has. If Tajiri were presented properly in WWF or WCW, I think he'd be 10 times as over as he is now, because of course you'd have that many more people watching. It's all in the presentation. Perception is reality. If The Rock were booked differently, he wouldn't be, and wasn't given the mic or wasn't given the opportunity to shine, he wouldn't be the damn Rock. It's just a difference in booking, and Paul is a guy who knows how to make stars. And it was like a lot of the people that came from ECW, I remember they'd be almost whispering about them in hushed, respectful tones as they came into the locker room, because it was almost as if, man, this is an ECW guy. This isn't just some guy we picked up out of the Indies in bumfuck Egypt somewhere. This guy obviously has done his time, and also they've been developed somewhat, enough to mark out the whoever was doing the hiring in WCW at the time to want them. And Tajiri is a guy that, like I was saying, booked properly, a huge star. And that's the same for just about anybody in our locker room, though. I think, some people would say that, what are you going to do with Mikey? Look what he did in WCW. Well, he did what he did in WCW because they didn't give a damn. That's the difference. They didn't work with him on developing any kind of character. Mikey's done a hell of a job in transforming his character from the little cookies and milk guy that he was, several years ago, and from just like the totally nondescript guy in WCW to being, I think, personally, and I think the reaction you see him get, like when he walked out on the pay-per-view, pretty much cements it for me. I think the people have really responded to it, and that's because Paul knows how to make a star, and he knows how to utilize his talent to the best of their ability.
Another thing WCW does that makes people so mad is, like, the 3-count Young Dragons feud. I mean, sometimes they'll let them go out there and do their thing and have a really great match, and then they'll not make any mention of it whatsoever, and, like, in between performances, they'll be doing jobs for everybody. And it gives fans, it lets them see what they can really do, and then it's just like it pisses them off by not letting them do anything else in the meantime between big matches.
Right. Well, again, you could write a book on what they do wrong in Atlanta.
And people will.
I have a question for you, Brian. A slight bone to pick with you. I was listening to your review of our pay-per-view. Now, I'm paraphrasing here, and I guess it's been a week almost. You said that you thought the matches were good and everybody worked really hard, but that you gave it a thumbs down because you didn't think the crowd gave a damn at all. And I'm thinking, what pay-per-view were you watching? Now, I was there live, and when I first heard that, and I hadn't seen the tape yet. Now, live, in the building live, and I asked several people who were there. They said that the energy in the crowd was through the roof. My perception was that it was through the roof and that everybody was happy. I went back and I watched the tape, and I've got to ask you, what was the crowd not popping for that they should have been popping for?
Actually, it was mostly, I mean, we got reports from live at the show, too, that said that the heat was great all night. Right. And for me, mostly, it was just, I was so disappointed in the reaction for the main event because, I mean, those guys...
The reaction we got from people live is that the main event didn't have any heat.
Yeah, and on TV, like the main event, I mean, even like for the first couple of minutes, it was all right, but then the Sandman chant started, and if there was like a death-defying spot, they would pop and then just like totally die. And it was so sad to watch, like the end of the match, all these guys are going for their near falls and hitting their finishers, and on TV there was just no reaction whatsoever to it.
Well, I actually have not seen the main event because my VCR was set at the wrong speed, so it cut off in the middle of Mikey and Tajiri's match with Cash and Super Crazy. But, you know, to me, and what I watched up to it, I couldn't see where it looked like the crowd didn't give a damn. They seemed to pop where they should pop. Everybody seemed to get great reactions from the crowd, and when they walked through the curtain, and I had to disagree with you on that because it. I think what pissed me off was you gave the show a thumb. You said you liked it, but you gave it a thumbs down because the crowd heat wasn't up to your expectations, and that was, you know, even if they were quiet. I mean, does that mean, I don't know, like the hearing impaired can't enjoy wrestling? I mean, if you watch it to be entertained, and you were entertained, and you thought everybody busted their ass, I just couldn't see the niggling over how loud you thought the crowd noise should be. But
the thing that's so hard is like the rating that we're I guess we've been doing it the whole time is giving like a A, B, C, D, E, or F or whatever, just no E, but whatever for the shows, and it's so hard because there's so many factors that go into it. And like going back through all the matches when I was writing the report for the newsletter, I mean, it wasn't like any of the matches I gave like bad ratings to, and I thought like overall from top to bottom, the matches were, you know, from I'd say average to pretty good to good. And just looking at the show, the main event, the heat was just, it was so depressing to me. And the show was over, and I thought of all these guys, you know, behind on pay, and just working so hard in the main event. And to me, it kind of hurt my enjoyment of the show, and thus that's the reason I gave it the grade.
Well, is that also because you're a wrestler and you're sort of feeling some empathy or something?
I'm sure that's part of it. I mean, that's just like I'm saying, on all these shows, there's so many factors that go into it. I mean, do you grade a show on just the effort? Do you grade a show on, you know, just the work rate? And, I mean, it's easier for me when I'm writing the newsletter because I can analyze it and say exactly why, right, you know, I'm giving, you know, a particular, whether I like the show or not. But the whole A, B, C, D, and F, it's just hard for me because, I mean, sometimes, like for a Thunder show, I mean, me and Dave disagree on a lot of Thunder shows because some of them are just, like, they're so unintentionally funny that I can sit there and actually enjoy a show, even though the show itself, like the quality of the wrestling and everything, is just hideous.
You know, on that thing, I mean, I know when I watched that show, the main event, I was feeling so bad for Jerry Lynn and Justin Credible and Carino as well, because they really worked hard to follow the tag match, and the crowd was not into the main event, and then they brawled up in the stands, and that took a lot of the crowd out of it because of the way the sight lines were in the building and everything, and, you know, they were chanting for Sandman right away, you know, and that's with Jerry Lynn, who's, you know, one of the 2 or 3 best wrestlers in the company, and maybe, you know, some would say even the best, you know, going out there. And it's like, I think what I was sad about in the main event was that they really did nothing wrong. Their wrestling was solid. They worked extra hard. And I mean, you can always, you know, go, well, their psychology wasn't there, but it was, you know, and I'm going like, there's nothing these guys can do, and they're working so hard, and for whatever reason, you know, the heat in the main event was real disappointing. Now, you know, the other matches, it was fine to good. There were some spots of your match that was through the roof. You know, when Crazy was in there with Tajiri, and that, to me, that was the highlight of the show was the spots with Crazy and Tajiri, and then that whole match was obviously the show stealer.
Well, you know, I really enjoyed the Tommy Dreamer C.W. Henderson match. I thought the psychology and just, you know, where he kept working on his arm and the ebb and flow of that match, I thought that was tremendous, and I thought they did a really good job elevating C.W. Anderson. That was one that I really I've gone back and watched a few times. I was very impressed by both of those guys in that match, and I thought they did a good job of making Rhino just a sick son of a bitch, mean bully monster. And also the reverse on Spike, being Goliath, and fighting up from underneath.
David, yeah.
Those were two that I've really enjoyed, for what they got across. But again, I thought everybody worked well, and to play devil's advocate, because again, I haven't seen the main event on tape yet, but just to assume that what you're saying is correct, that the crowd was dead for it. I think that it's a tremendous testament to the dedication that these guys have, that knowing what's going on with the company right now, that they still went out there and worked just as damn hard as they would have in Madison Square Garden at a WrestleMania crowd. I think that that they're just tremendously dedicated guys. And I don't think that, and again, I hate to keep taking pot shots at WCW. It sounds like I'm, carrying a hard-on around for them a year later, and, I don't even care anymore. But I don't think that, in a WCW event where if you had, I won't even mention the players, but certain players in there and the crowd was dead, I think a lot of times you'd get them in there just goofing off, and halfway cracking jokes in the ring. I've seen that kind of stuff, definitely happen on house shows and on some TV tapings to where it screwed stuff up and they couldn't even air the match.
Like an interview last night on Thunder.
Jeez, that was
like a comedy segment. I mean, overall,
it wasn't even comedy. It was unprofessional.
Yeah, I would say
on everyone's standpoint. I mean, production more than anyone.
Mm-hmm.
What happened on it? What was it?
There was an interview with Nash and Page, and the lighting to set up, it was like a backstage type of an interview, and it was taped. And Stevie Ray did the interview, and Stevie Ray had never done this before, and he wasn't, he was just green at doing an interview. And he ran out of things to say, and he just kind of paused, and they didn't edit any of this out. And it's a pre-tape, so you can say take one, take two.
Right.
And they talked about Scott Hall, like they must have mentioned his name 25 times, even though they weren't supposed to at all. Instead of saying cut, stop, you're not allowed to mention his name. They just let it roll.
But they bleeped them all out, so.
And then they bleeped it all out, so.
Talking about.
But everyone knew, and it's like people at home are going like, why is Scott Hall's name being bleeped? It's not like it's a dirty word, So it was just the strangest thing to air in that form. It never should have aired.
Right.
Plus, as the lights, I should say, as the lighting is flickering, Kevin Nash's eyes are kind of like wandering around looking at this lighting flickering. This stuff shouldn't make TV. It's live TV. Sure, it should make TV because it's live TV. But when you're on tape and it's you just say stop. We'll pick up from here. I mean, my God, you've done enough TV to know that it can certainly be done.
Absolutely. I don't understand that whole thing about getting on there and saying things that you're not supposed to just to rile the office up. I mean, obviously I understand why they're doing it, but I don't understand why a company would put up with that, and let it go on again and again. And I don't mean to take any jabs at Dallas Page, because certainly, I mean, that's the guy most responsible for, getting me on national television to begin with, and he's, been a great help in my career. But, I don't know if that stuff's, if it's scripted, I don't understand the point behind it, and if they're deviating from the script, I don't know how they allow it to continue to go on. I mean, if you're not supposed to talk about Scott Hall, don't talk about him,
Well, the whole thing is that the top guys know that they're not ever going to get punished. So it's like, I don't even blame them at this point anymore. I mean, about the first or second or third time they did it, especially with Nash, it was just like, why are you doing this? By now, it's just like, well, why don't you do it forever? I mean, no one cares. If no one's going to care enough to stop you, then, why should, you know what I mean?
Uh-huh.
I mean, Nash should have been suspended, a long time ago for this, and the fact that he isn't just tells you that he's going to do it forever with impunity. And he knows it, and and whatever they get, they've asked for anyway. That's my theory on it now. It's like whatever they get as a product, they ask for because they didn't crack down on anyone. I mean, I couldn't imagine if Paul hated somebody. Sabu, perfect example. Okay, when things were going bad, if you had done a promo and just gone, don't you think all of us fans it's so unfair what happened to Sabu. He's not getting a second chance, you know. And those fans, you know, if you push it on the fans, of course they'll go, we want Sabu. They loved Sabu. He worked hard for him for all those years. He's kind of a mystical character for them and everything like that, you know, in the glory days of ECW. Of course you get a crowd reaction, but Paul would never air it if he really wasn't going to bring the guy back. If he's going to bring the guy back, it's a great way to do it.
Sure, but if you're not, you know, why waste time that, you know, putting over somebody that you're not going to make any money on?
They don't understand the idea of time and money.
You know, if you've got 2 minutes of television time, why not spend it hyping your pay-per-view or furthering something that's going to mean something and put some asses in seats? So, but again, you could write a book about Atlanta. Maybe you should. I want to ask you guys a question too. What do you guys think of Tony Mamaluke?
Super
I hope he
bump
doesn't kill himself.
Yeah.
He's like my favorite wrestler of the month.
Really?
And you were talking about Tajiri and, you know, how he would be used. Tony Mamaluke, another example of a guy who is really talented. They had no idea what to do with him. He can wrestle his ass off. Funny performer. He does funny-ass promos. And he's got a really funny one coming up that should air in the next week or two that I watched Paul produce. You know, really funny stuff. But I think he's just one hell of a talent. Super guy who is being used the way he should be. Instead of saying, oh, this guy weighs 160 pounds dripping wet, screw him. You know, people react to him. People enjoy his performances. And he is insane. You know, his bumps, I mean, I don't know why the hell he takes them, but if they make him happy, you know, I'm not going to tell him to stop, you know, as long as he's not hurt.
I thought he was done for when he took that bump off the apron onto the guardrail.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I've had that feeling about 4 times or 6 times since he's been in ECW where he did one of those guardrail bumps where I think he landed on his head on the guardrail.
Yeah.
He's not getting up.
That first match he was in.
With Mikey, when he just wiped out on the guardrail doing whatever that move was, some kind of Hurricanrana looking thing. But, you know, the guy's got the healing power of, like, I don't know, the regenerative power of Padre Pio or somebody. I mean, or some kind of saint. I mean, I've seen him take some insane bumps where you just think he's dead, he's wiped out, any normal man's not going to get up from this. And the guy's back in the back 5 minutes later laughing and goofing around. So he has the rare ability, I guess, to, along with people like Cactus Jack, to do some insane stuff and walk away from it.
We've got to head to a break. I want to bring up 2 real quick things before we head to the break. Doug Dillinger, this is from Richard Sullivan. Doug Dillinger was, in fact, a cameraman after Jim Crockett bought the TV truck in 1983. They did all that great television in those days with tin cans and strings. Klondike Bill did the lighting. Gene Anderson was the line producer, and Doug Dillinger and Jackie Crockett handled the camera work along with 1 or 2 others. So he actually was a cameraman. The other thing is that, they are going to be taping Nitro Monday in Bossier City, Louisiana, which will air on Tuesday. They will be doing live in Richmond on the 18th, and then there is going to be a show for Christmas that will be taped in Memphis on the 22nd. And I don't think I think New Year's is the day that there is no show. So, anyway, that's as best we can tell. This is from Joel Colesrode, who sent us in because literally nobody knows. So, we're trying to, like, assume based on scheduling what's exactly going on with Nitro for the next month. Gene.
Yeah.
Okay, go ahead.
Hey, what's up, guys?
Nothing much.
Hey, check this out. I was wondering, what's the deal with the pay-per-view in January? It's they don't have I think it's the Sin video or something like that.
The what?
Sin, WCW Sin.
Oh, the WCW Sin pay-per-view.
But it's
what about
it? It's like to be announced. I mean, does that have anything to do with it might not be showing or?
There's some deal going on with In Demand and WCW where they actually haven't signed the contracts for next year, so the dates are reserved, and but they're not but like In Demand is probably not advertising the pay-per-views until the contracts are signed.
Wait, would that make the buy rates even worse?
Well, no. I mean, I don't think it'll make the buy rates worse if they air the pay-per-view, but if they don't, if they don't come to a contract, there won't even be a pay-per-view for the buy rates to be worse, basically, because In Demand's pretty much
pretty sad.
In Demand's pretty much a monopoly as far as the cable. I mean, they could still be on the dishes like the UFC stuff, where you can still get them on a dish, but if In Demand doesn't pick them up, then it would not be on your cable systems, which would, ultimately WCW has to sign the contract or they can't do the pay-per-view. You know what I mean? I mean, it's their hands forced. It's just, In Demand's just like, tightening the grip by, not giving, the advertising right now, so.
Well, can I look into anything of Shawn Michaels being at the WWF New York Sunday? Are they trying to like build him back up for a comeback? I mean, because why would he be there?
I mean, they always want to have one guest making a personal appearance at WWF New York. But as far as, yeah, I think everyone knows that there's a really good shot that he's going to wrestle at WrestleMania. I mean, I think everyone kind of knows that. So yeah, that's what it's going to be. I don't think that what he's doing at WWF New York is going to be an angle, although it could be.
I was thinking maybe they're going to do some kind of angle. Would lead to something, because it's only a few more months until they would have to say something, about him returning. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I mean, I expect they'll probably shoot it in February. Wouldn't you think? I don't know.
Okay, and my last question is for James about ECW. Getting on cable. Have they looked at like prospects of like adult cable? I don't mean like a Spice or Playboy, but like HBO, Showtime, channels like that.
I don't know. I remember hearing years ago that Paul was trying to work out something with Showtime a long time ago. I really don't know. I think that what would be best for the company, though, would be to be on a mainstream national cable outlet. I think you're going to obviously have less of an audience if you've got, if you're on HBO or Cinemax or whatever. I think it's better for the company, and I'm sure Paul probably agrees the same way that we need to be on.
Well, because doesn't HBO, the shows on there, do they do less ratings than, say for instance like Raw?
I don't understand how ratings work enough.
Yeah, me neither.
Some of the shows
like
Dave, here you go.
Some of the shows like The Sopranos do actually do very, very well on the pay thing. But the thing for ECW, where it's real important to me, and of course he's got to go with the best deal he can get, as opposed to the best deal, the deal that's perfect for him. But the key for ECW is growth, and for growth you've got to be in a place where the average person can see you, which would be like a USA or it's got to be one of these cable systems that has 70 million plus homes. If you're going to like a Showtime, your hardcore fans will buy Showtime. Your real hardcore ECW fans will buy Showtime to get your ECW, but you're not going to get a lot of the new viewers, which is the whole key. He's done a great job of maintaining his core viewers. Even under these bad circumstances, the key to growth is new viewers, and that means you got to have exposure where people can happenstance on you and then get hooked.
All right, hey, thanks a lot, guys.
Sure.
Okay, very welcome. This is from Brian, who says, the very intelligent Mr. Mitchell is exactly right. Who cares about crowd heat? A good match is a good match. It just means that the audience at the arena are idiots. Not necessarily. They may be tired.
Funny story, by the way.
Okay.
I never
go
wrote
ahead.
an ECW pay-per-view report for the website.
No, you didn't. But you did. But you were on here. You did give it a
I
thumbs
think it was
down.
probably like the Wrestling Observer Live report.
Yeah. But I mean, I remember because we discussed
That
it.
is what I said, though.
It is Monday.
Funny, I'm trying to go back and find out what grade I gave it, and I couldn't find the report.
You didn't, because you didn't do it.
I didn't write it.
Yeah, you didn't write it. So.
But that is what I thought.
Yeah. Okay. Let's see. Where are we now? Let's see. Jim once said that he led the life of a Pulp Fiction character. Does this incident reinforce that belief?
Yeah. You mean the hand incident, I guess.
Yeah.
Certainly. And you know what? That's what it looked like. That's what Mikey looked like. He looked like that scene in the car where they were driving and John Travolta accidentally shot the guy in the head, and all of a sudden they were covered in goo. That certainly brought it to mind. Yeah, I lead a pretty interesting life.
Let's go to Sean. Sean's back on the line. Sean, what's going on?
Hey guys, what's going on?
Hello, Sean.
I wanted to talk about marketing real quick. I love what the WWF and even ECW, for that matter, is doing with marketing especially to the home video market with DVDs and whatnot. Do you think if ECW tried to increase their marketing budget, either on like a regional scale around the Northeast or even on a national scale, would that help the company, or is it just in a bad way right now?
Are you asking me that question?
Anyone, actually.
I think right now the key is survival, and I mean they're not going to be increasing the marketing budget right now because I don't think they have the funds to divert to that direction. I think that they're just trying to hold on until they because ultimately either one of two things is going to happen. They're either going to ECW is not going to get TV which means they're going to have to stay at a very small scale, and it's going to be impossible to grow, or they're going to get TV, but until that point, there's no point in spending a lot of money on that you don't have right now. So I think all of that kind of stuff is kind of going to be in a holding pattern until TV and or money comes in.
I think with ECW, because the fans are so hardcore, I mean, if you're talking about marketing, like putting up posters or buying ads, I think the hardcore fans that watch ECW are going to know when the shows are, and they'll know how to find them. And I don't think that any type of marketing like that is going to attract the casual fan, which is what they need, and I think that's, it's going to be all the TV.
Yeah, that's a good point, because I've got the couple of WWF DVDs, and even I've got both ECW ones, and they're slick. I mean, they're really nice. And I still can't believe WCW hasn't done anything like that, because I think there's a market for it.
I just think, again, we could write a book about WCW. I sit, when I get those video charts every other week when they're in Billboard, and I look and I think if I was running WCW, I would be embarrassed that FMW in Japan is in the top 20, that ECW has 2 tapes in the top 20, that Insane Clown Posse and Extreme Pro Wrestling, that don't even have real wrestling companies for the most part, are in the top 20. WWF has 12 tapes in the top 20, and they haven't had a tape in the top 20 in like almost a year, or at least many, many months. I know they haven't released anything, but how not even why is it? How can this happen? How can this even happen that you have all this TV and you can't get how can granted Extreme Pro Wrestling's part of that is because of the confusion in the marketplace and people think they're ECW, but FMW in Japan, there is no excuse, and they're like in the top 10 right now. So explain that.
JCW was in the top 5 for a while. How does that happen?
JCW was around number 5. I think they're right around number 10 right now. Yeah. How does that happen? Well, how is this possible? By the way, speaking of JCW, because we haven't mentioned this yet, Vampiro is off tour. He's no longer playing for Insane Clown Posse. The story is that all of the noise was giving him terrible headaches because of this concussion. So he's back home. Just wanted to bring that up because we haven't talked about it on the show yet.
Yeah, I bought the FMW DVD. I think it's called The Legend Dawns or something. There's a couple of decent matches, but I don't think it's worth it. And,
isn't the commentary really bad?
You haven't seen it yet, Dave?
It's pretty.
No, I haven't seen it.
I was watching. My friend didn't show me the whole thing because I didn't want to watch it, but he showed me. It's like Mike Awesome versus Hayabusa, and Hayabusa does this shooting star press and just doesn't make it all the way over and lands right on his head upside down. The most brutal thing you ever saw.
Yeah.
Like, you'd think he'd be dead, and the commentators start making fun of him and mocking him and going, "Oh, my neck," and it's the most horrible commentary. It is actually not both of them. The Watanabe guy wasn't too bad, but the other guy was just brutally bad.
Yeah, speaking of killing somebody, I was watching Nitro on Monday, and I think it was the tag team match with Nash and
Shannon Moore?
Yeah.
Shannon Moore, that deal?
Or something?
It's like a deal, I think.
Yeah, and he just dropped him on his head. I just wanted to go through my screen and beat his ass. I couldn't believe he did that. Kevin Nash is such a jackass. I mean, if he's going to keep doing that stuff on TV, they're not going to bring Hall back, but, he keeps making all these motions to the camera, and, he's got this, shit-eating grin on his face. They need to cut him.
Yeah, because he knows he's smarter than everybody else. Or if he's not smarter, he can get away with it. He's like some kid in high school that, gets away with every single thing that he does, and, he's, showing off for the rest of the guys, because you guys, if any of you guys did this, you'd be suspended, but they'll never touch me because they're afraid of me.
Yeah, but even if they drop his contract, what's he making, $1.6 million?
$1.6 million a year.
It's not gonna hurt the ratings. I mean, the ratings.
No, he doesn't mean anything for ratings. They have no superstars that are over, because if they did, maybe Flair in the right circumstance does something for ratings, and obviously I think Scott Steiner's a great character, but even Scott Steiner, if he was on a show, it's not going to make a difference in the ratings.
Yeah, and I'm just glad Hogan's gone. He needs to. He's an Orange Goblin. He needs to go somewhere and die. But that's about it. Thanks a lot, guys.
Okay, you're very welcome. Oh, let's see. What you got any as far as goals or future plans or anything like that for the team, and where you want to be in the next couple of months, or more people on the roster that you wouldn't mind working with?
You mean tag teams and whatnot?
Just or maybe some of the young guys, I'm just the Confederate Currency guys, or some of the underneath Christian York, Joey Matthews, those type of guys.
Yeah, I'd love to work with Swinger and Simon. I think they've been a really good team. I think they've got good characters, really hardworking guys. I think Easy Money is just, God, really been mind-blowing. Really does some very impressive moves. I think that we could have really good matches with him and Julio and with Hamrick, who's also one of the most, probably a more insane bump taker than Mamalu. We've got a lot of talent there in the locker room, and a lot to work with. I don't know if I would imagine we're gonna go back and forth with the FBI with this story thing on and off over the next few months. But there's anybody in that locker room, I think that we could really have an exciting series with. And that,
have you run across any other guys on the indie scene that you really think should be brought in?
You know what? Honestly, I haven't run into a lot of. I haven't been to a lot of indies in the last year and a half. Guys, and if you're asking specifically into our company, I can't. It probably wouldn't be appropriate for me to be naming guys that Paul should bring in. That's more his business. One indie guy that I think has really impressed me when I've seen him wrestle is the Shark Boy. I don't think that the Shark Boy gimmick itself is something that would necessarily get over, but I've met the guy, and he's got a great personality, and I think if you booked him right, in the same way with Mama Luke, he's a smaller guy, but God, he's got a pile of charisma, and really does some pretty good looking stuff from what I've seen. So that would be a guy on the indie circuit that I think should be pulled up into one of the companies and have something done with him.
Okay. I'm just trying to think if there's anything else that's going on. Mike, how much time do we have? Okay, let's go to Paul, New York.
Yeah, hi. How about WB Network for ECW?
If they can get on. I mean, I think Paul would die and go to heaven if he had national WB exposure. I mean, that's the... See ya!
Oh, my God.
I snuck in right before the show ended. That's... Oh, man. We're supposed to...
He could have at least asked about Abdullah.
Yeah, but then we would have known. Oh, God. Let's see. It says, have you been to Roddy Piper's website? Have you been to Roddy Piper's website, Brian?
No, I didn't even know he had one.
RoddyRaw.com. Just want to bring that up because a lot of people have been there, and it's quite entertaining. Let's see. This is from Bill, who says Kevin Nash and company are supposedly being reined in, but that awful interview on Thunder was proof that this is false. Scott Hall's name may have been bleeped, but they talked about him for 5 straight minutes and gave so much context that anyone even slightly familiar with wrestling could figure it out, especially given the close-ups of the guys and the careful and deliberate enunciation of his name as it's being bleeped out. Oh, that was so... How did that ever air? How does this ever get going? This is just something for Jim. Jim, Eric Bischoff's rated ECW for talent in the past. If he takes over, do you think he's going to start looking at ECW? Because obviously he's going to want to look for something to freshen up a stale act.
No, I certainly wouldn't be surprised if he tried to. I don't know that, you read a lot of shit on the internet where it says, oh, everybody's ready to jump off of our ship and go run for greener pastures. I don't really think that's the case. I think that a lot of our guys, and especially if we get a network deal, I couldn't imagine the majority of the people in our locker room wanting to go for the quote-unquote bigger exposure of WCW. Will he try? Sure. He's done it in the past, and he said that, he would piss on our grave or something, and he hasn't been able to do it yet. Paul's like an alligator or a cockroach or something. He's been around a long time, and you can't kill him off. No matter who they steal from us, it's not stealing. Somebody wants to go get a job somewhere, that's the move they make for their career. But, you could raid all our talent, and Paul would still wind up finding new people, and over time he would turn them into stars in our company, and people would respond.
Okay, Jim, we're totally out of time right now. I want to thank you very much for doing the show. I want to also remind everyone that Les Thatcher will be here tomorrow, and we'll have Juventud Guerrera on Monday. I want to thank Jim Mitchell and Brian Alvarez and Mike for handling the phones, and we'll see you all tomorrow at 6.